Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that might make you rethink every piece of paper you've ever thrown away. You know those true crime documentaries where a single receipt solves a decades-old mystery? Well, imagine that, but multiply it by 1,000, add some medieval court records, and sprinkle in enough dust to choke a historian. Because tonight, we're diving into the paper trails that solved cases everyone else forgot existed. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've probably heard the romanticized version of historical detective work. Some brilliant scholar in tweed discovers a hidden document, gasps dramatically, and suddenly solves a centuries-old mystery over afternoon tea. The reality? You're more likely to spend 6 months deciphering chicken scratch handwriting, only to discover it's a grocery list from 1743, with really expensive turnips. But here's the thing about paper trails. They're everywhere. In dusty courthouse basements, forgotten church archives, and estate sale boxes marked old junk. They're waiting, patient as spiders, holding secrets that can resurrect the dead, convict the long-buried guilty, and sometimes, just sometimes, rewrite everything we thought we knew about history. Tonight, you're not just an observer. You're an archivist's apprentice in 1994, assigned to a basement storage room that hasn't been properly cataloged since the Eisenhower administration. The fluorescent lights flicker like they're Morse coding warnings. The smell hits you first, that unique blend of decomposing paper, ancient mold, and what you're pretty sure is a mummified mouse somewhere in box 47B. Your supervisor, a woman who's been doing this since Kennedy was president, hands you cotton gloves and a dust mask. Third row, boxes 1847 through 1852, she says, like she's assigning you to clean toilets. Court records. Nothing interesting, just property disputes and petty theft. Should take you all week. You nod, already planning which podcast to listen to while you sort through what will surely be mind-numbing lists of stolen chickens and fence line arguments. You have no idea that in 4 hours, you'll be holding a document that will crack open a murder case from 1849. A case everyone thought was solved. A case where they hanged the wrong person. The first box cracks open with a sound like breaking bones. Dust motes dance in the air like tiny ghosts. You pull out the first bundle of papers, bound with string so old it disintegrates at your touch. The handwriting looks like someone dipped a spider in ink and let it tap dance across the page. This is going to be a long week. But before we dive into your discovery, let's talk about why these paper trails exist in the first place. You see, in the 1800s, paper wasn't just for writing. It was evidence, it was power, and sometimes it was a death sentence wrapped in legal language. Back then, if you were accused of a crime, let's say theft, because murder's coming later, the paper trail began immediately. Not with Miranda rights or digital recordings, but with a constable's notebook, water-stained and barely legible. Every detail mattered because there were no photographs, no fingerprints, no DNA. Just words on paper, and whoever wrote them down. The accused would be brought before a magistrate. And here's where it gets interesting. Everything said in that room was supposed to be recorded by a clerk. Supposed to be. These clerks were often underpaid, overworked, and occasionally drunk by noon. They abbreviated wildly, invented their own shorthand, and sometimes just gave up mid-sentence when things got too heated. You're reading one of these documents now. The case of Thomas Hartwell, accused of stealing 2 pounds of bacon in January 1847. The clerk started strong. Thomas Hartwell, laborer, did on the 5th day of January. Then the handwriting gets progressively worse until the final lines look like someone sneezed ink onto the page. But here's what made these documents powerful. They were considered sacred. Once something was written down, sealed, and filed, it became truth. It didn't matter if the clerk misheard, misunderstood, or was having a particularly creative day. That paper could send you to prison, to the colonies, or to the gallows. You flip through more cases. Mary Sullivan accused of prostitution, 3 pages of moral outrage disguised as legal procedure. James McCreary, drunk and disorderly. Apparently he sang inappropriate songs about the mayor's wife. Each case a little window into lives that ended over a century ago. Then you notice something odd. The dates jump. January, February, March, then nothing until July. 4 months of missing records. Could be they were misfiled, could be they were lost, or could be someone deliberately removed them. You make a note on your laptop. Yes, you're allowed 1 piece of modern technology in this temple of old paper. Missing, April-June 1847. You'll ask your supervisor later. For now, you move on to box 2. Box 2 is heavier. The papers inside are thicker, bound in leather covers that have survived better than the loose documents. These are the serious cases. Assault, arson, and there, wedged between a case about barn burning and one about horse theft, you find it. The Crown versus Margaret O'Brien, charged with the willful murder of her husband Patrick O'Brien, May 15, 1847. You sit up straighter. Murder cases were rare in this small county, maybe one every few years. This would have been the talk of the entire region. You carefully open the file, trying not to damage the brittle pages. The first page is the formal charge. Standard legal language of the time, lots of whereas and heretofore and other words lawyers use to justify their fees. But the second page makes you pause. It's a witness statement, and the handwriting is different. Neater. More controlled. Almost too controlled. Like someone was trying very hard to appear calm while writing about finding a body. I, Dr. Josiah Mills, being duly sworn, do testify that on the morning of May 16th, I was summoned to the residence of Patrick O'Brien. I found said Patrick O'Brien deceased, with evidence of poisoning by arsenic. His wife, Margaret O'Brien, was present and in a state of considerable distress. Arsenic, the Victorian divorce attorney, as historians sometimes darkly joke. But something about this statement feels off. You've been reading these documents all morning, getting a feel for how people wrote back then. This is different. Too formal, too careful. Like someone was constructing an alibi out of words. You keep reading. More witness statements. The local pharmacist swearing he sold arsenic to Margaret O'Brien 2 weeks before her husband's death. For rats, she'd said. The neighbors testifying they heard arguments. The cook reporting that Margaret had prepared her husband's final meal alone, refusing help. It's damning. Every piece of evidence points to Margaret. No wonder they convicted her. You flip to the final pages, expecting to find the execution order. Instead, you find something that makes your blood run cold. A letter. Folded and pressed between the final pages like someone was trying to hide it. The paper is different, cheaper, rougher. The kind someone poor would use. And the handwriting. You've seen this handwriting before. That same too controlled, too neat script from the doctor's testimony. My dearest Catherine, it begins. By the time you read this, it will be done. Margaret O'Brien will hang for what I have done, and we will be free to marry. Your hands are shaking slightly as you hold the letter. This isn't supposed to be here. This letter should have been destroyed 147 years ago. But someone, the clerk maybe, or another court official, slipped it into the official record. Hidden in plain sight. Waiting. You read the letter 3 times before its full implications sink in. Dr. Josiah Mills, the respected physician who found the body, who testified at the trial, who helped send Margaret O'Brien to the gallows, he was the murderer. The letter continues, I administered the arsenic during my regular visit to treat Patrick's gout. A little more each time mixed with his medicine. No one suspected the doctor. Why would they? I am here to heal, not harm. But Patrick stood between us, my love. His death was necessary for our happiness. You're not in that basement anymore. You're in 1847, watching this unfold. You can see Dr. Mills, probably mid-40s, well-dressed, the kind of man everyone trusts. He'd have made house calls regularly. Patrick O'Brien, suffering from gout, a rich man's disease, would have welcomed him, would have drunk whatever medicine the good doctor provided. The letter reveals more. Dr. Mills had been having an affair with Catherine Pemberton, a widow who couldn't remarry while her late husband's estate was still in probate. But if she married a doctor, a respected member of society who could challenge the will, suddenly those legal complications might disappear. There was just one problem. Dr. Mills was already married. My wife grows more suspicious by the day, the letter continues. But once Margaret hangs for Patrick's murder, I will have proved my skill at this dark art. Eleanor will be next, though I must wait some months to avoid suspicion. Another illness, perhaps. Something lingering but not unexpected for a woman of her nervous disposition. You feel sick. This isn't just evidence of one murder. It's a confession to one murder. Evidence of framing an innocent woman and plans for another murder. And it's been sitting here in a courthouse basement for almost 150 years. But wait, you check the dates again. The letter is dated May 20th, 1847. Margaret O'Brien was tried in June, hanged in July. This letter was written after the murder but before the trial. Why didn't Catherine Pemberton turn it over to authorities? Why let an innocent woman die? You photograph every page with your phone, technically against protocol, but you have a feeling your supervisor will forgive you. Then you notice something else. There's another document tucked behind the letter, a death certificate. Catherine Pemberton died May 22, 1847. Cause of death, accidental drowning. 2 days after receiving a letter confessing to murder. That's one hell of a coincidence. Your supervisor doesn't believe you at first. Martha's been working in these archives for 37 years, and in her experience, the most exciting thing anyone ever finds is a will leaving everything to a cat. But when you show her the photographs, her expression changes. We need to verify this, she says, but her voice is shaking. If this is real, it means Margaret O'Brien was innocent. It means Dr. Mills got away with at least one murder, possibly two. It means the entire justice system failed catastrophically, and it means you've just stumbled onto one of the biggest historical discoveries in the county's history. The next 3 days blur together. You and Martha pull every record you can find related to the case. Birth certificates, death certificates, marriage records, property deeds. Each document adds another piece to a puzzle that's been scattered across time. You find Dr. Mills' medical license, pristine of course, his marriage certificate to Eleanor Mills, dated 1825. You find Patrick O'Brien's will, leaving everything to his beloved wife Margaret, which makes the murder seem even more senseless. Why would she kill a husband who clearly adored her? Then Martha finds something in the pharmacy records, not the official ledger that was used in court, but the pharmacist's personal notebook. He was a meticulous record keeper, noting not just what he sold, but when and to whom. And according to his notes, Dr. Mills purchased arsenic 6 times in the months leading up to Patrick O'Brien's death. For medical purposes, the notation reads, but Margaret O'Brien's purchase, the one that helped convict her, has a different notation. Just one word, rats. You cross-reference with property records. The O'Brien house had reported a rat infestation to the city health inspector just 2 weeks before Margaret bought the arsenic. There's even a follow-up report noting the infestation had been successfully dealt with. Every document you find makes Margaret look more innocent and Dr. Mills look more guilty. But there's still the question of Catherine Pemberton's convenient drowning. Martha finds that record. Catherine's body was discovered in the mill pond on her property. She'd apparently gone for an evening walk and fallen in. The coroner's report was signed by Dr. Josiah Mills. Of course it was. He was the only doctor for miles, Martha says quietly. He'd have been called to any suspicious death. You're building a case 147 years too late. Margaret O'Brien is long dead, executed for a crime she didn't commit. Dr. Mills lived another 40 years, dying peacefully in his bed in 1887, respected and eulogized in the local newspaper as a pillar of the community. But the paper trail doesn't lie, and it's not done revealing secrets. It's your fourth day in the basement when you find it. You're going through Box 3, August to December 1847, when a folded paper falls out from between two unrelated cases. It's been misfiled, clearly. The paper is that same cheap, rough material you've come to associate with Catherine Pemberton. But this isn't another letter from Dr. Mills. This is Catherine's reply. Your heart pounds as you carefully unfold it. The handwriting is feminine, educated but emotional. Ink blots suggest tears or a shaking hand. Josiah, I cannot call you my dearest, not after reading your confession. You monster. You absolute monster. You killed that poor man and planned to let his wife hang for it? And you dare speak of killing your own wife, as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience to our happiness? The letter is dated May 21st, 1847. The day before Catherine died. I will not be party to such evil. Tomorrow I go to the magistrate with your letter. I pray God forgives me for ever loving such a creature as you. Margaret O'Brien will not hang for your sins, this I swear. But she never made it to the magistrate, because that night, Catherine Pemberton went for a walk by her mill pond and never came back. You can see it now, clear as if you were there. Dr. Mills receiving this letter, realizing his carefully laid plans were crumbling. He couldn't let Catherine go to the authorities, so he did what he did best. He killed her and made it look like an accident. The letter continues, I have hidden your original letter where you will never find it. If something happens to me, I pray someone will discover it and know the truth. The law may not touch you in this life, Josiah, but God sees all. Hidden where he would never find it, and somehow it ended up in the court records. But how? You go back to the trial documents, reading more carefully this time. There, a name you'd overlooked before. The court clerk who recorded Margaret O'Brien's trial, Thomas Pemberton. Pemberton, Catherine's maiden name? You checked the genealogy records Martha pulled. Yes, Thomas was Catherine's younger brother. He must have found the letter after her death. But with Catherine dead, it was just hearsay. Not enough to save Margaret O'Brien, but enough to preserve for history. You imagine him, this clerk, wrestling with his conscience. His sister dead, unable to testify. A letter that no court would accept as evidence without her to verify it. But he could at least ensure the truth survived, even if justice didn't. So he slipped it into the official record, hidden between the pages of the very trial it should have stopped. Waiting for someone, someday, to find it. Waiting for you. By now, word has gotten out. Your supervisor tried to keep it quiet, but courthouses are terrible at keeping secrets. The local newspaper sends a reporter who looks about 12 and asks if you feel like Indiana Jones but for papers. The Historical Society wants to hold an emergency meeting. The mayor's office calls twice, but you're not done yet, because something doesn't add up. Dr. Mills' plan, as outlined in his letter, was to marry Catherine after a suitable mourning period for both Patrick O'Brien and his own wife, Eleanor. But Catherine died before the trial. So what happened to the plan to murder Eleanor Mills? Back to the death records. Eleanor Mills died in 1851, 4 years after the O'Brien murder. Cause of death? Cholera outbreak. Except when you check the health department records, there was no cholera outbreak in 1851. The last one had been in 1849, and the next wouldn't be until 1854. You find Eleanor's burial record. She's interred in the Mills family plot, with a modest headstone that reads "Beloved Wife and Mother." Dr. Mills remarried just 8 months after her death to a woman named Constance Hartwell. Hartwell. Why does that name sound familiar? You flip back through your notes. Thomas Hartwell, the bacon thief from your first day. You check the family records. Constance was Thomas's daughter, which means Dr. Mills married the daughter of a man who'd been branded a thief. Hardly a socially advantageous match for a respected doctor. Unless he had something on him. Martha helps you pull the Hartwell records. Thomas was convicted of theft in January 1847, sentenced to 6 months in prison. But there's a notation in the margin of his file. Sentence commuted, service to Dr. J. Mills in lieu of imprisonment. Dr. Mills had taken Thomas Hartwell as an indentured servant instead of letting him go to prison. And 4 years later, he married the man's daughter. That's not a love match. That's leverage. You find one more document that makes your skin crawl. It's a letter from Constance Mills to her sister, dated 1852, a year after her marriage. He is not unkind, but there is a coldness to him that chills me. Sometimes I catch him looking at me as a farmer might look at livestock, calculating my worth. Father says I am fortunate to have married so well, but I fear. The letter cuts off there. The rest of the page has been torn away. Every document you find adds another layer to Dr. Mills' monstrosity. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a serial manipulator who used his position, his respectability, and the legal system itself as weapons. It's been a week now. The basement that seemed so dreary on your first day has become the most important room in the county. Historians from the state university have arrived. A forensic document expert confirms the letters are authentic. The local news has picked up the story. But you're still finding things. In a box marked Miscellaneous 1850s, you discover Dr. Mills's appointment book. Most of it is routine. Mrs. Cooper's rheumatism, the Reverend's gout, childhood ailments, and broken bones. But you notice a pattern. In the months before Patrick O'Brien's death, Dr. Mills was visiting the O'Brien house twice a week. After Patrick's death, those appointments stopped abruptly. More interesting are his visits to the Pemberton house. They began 6 months before Patrick's murder and increased in frequency until Catherine's death. After that, nothing. Martha finds the smoking gun in the financial records. Dr. Mills' bank statements show large deposits in June 1847, right after Catherine's death. The amounts match exactly with withdrawals from Catherine Pemberton's account. Withdrawals made after her death, authorized by Dr. Mills as the attending physician who'd certified her death. He robbed her too, Martha whispers, killed her, and then stole her money. The paper trail paints a picture of a man who killed for convenience, who framed the innocent without remorse, who viewed human lives as obstacles to be removed, and he got away with all of it. Or did he? You remember something. Dr. Mills lived until 1887, 40 years after the murders. You pull the newspaper archives from his final years. The obituary is glowing as expected. Beloved physician, pillar of the community, devoted to healing. But there's another article from a year before his death. A small item about Dr. Mills retiring from practice due to persistent illness and mental fatigue. You dig deeper. The county asylum records from 1886 show a patient admitted under the name J. Mills, suffering from delusions and persistent guilt manifesting in claims of speaking with the dead. The patient insisted that Margaret O'Brien visits nightly, and Catherine stands by my bed dripping pond water. The attending physician's notes are clinical but revealing. Patient shows extreme agitation when discussing events from 1847. Claims to have killed them all, but becomes violent when pressed for details. Recommend continued sedation and isolation. So Dr. Mills didn't escape justice entirely. In his final years, his mind betrayed him, forcing him to confront the ghosts he'd created. Whether it was conscience, dementia, or simple madness, He spent his last months tormented by his victims. It's not enough, not nearly enough for what he did. But it's something. 2 weeks after your discovery, the courthouse holds a press conference. You stand in the background while officials announce the findings. Margaret O'Brien's conviction will be posthumously overturned. A memorial will be erected. The historical record will be corrected. It feels both momentous and hollow. Margaret O'Brien can't be brought back. Her final moments facing the gallows for a crime she didn't commit can't be undone. Dr. Mills can't be punished. Justice, arriving 147 years late, is a cold comfort. But the truth matters. The paper trail matters. You think about Thomas Pemberton, the clerk who hid these documents. He couldn't save Margaret O'Brien, but he could ensure her innocence would eventually be known. A small act of defiance against a system that had failed so catastrophically. After the press conference, Martha takes you aside. "I've been doing this for almost 4 decades, she says. "I've always told myself these were just old papers, dead history. But you've shown me something. These aren't just documents, they're voices. And sometimes, if we listen carefully enough, we can still hear them." The basement doesn't seem so dreary anymore. Every box potentially holds another voice, another truth, another chance to right an old wrong. You've solved one case, but there are thousands more boxes, thousands more stories, thousands more truths waiting to be uncovered. Your phone buzzes. The reporter from the state newspaper wants an interview. The true crime podcast people are calling. Netflix is interested. The story of Margaret O'Brien and Dr. Mills is about to become famous in a way neither of them could have imagined. But you're already thinking about Box 4, about those missing months from early 1847, about what other secrets might be hiding in plain sight, pressed between pages of routine court business. Because now you know the truth about paper trails. They're not just records of the past, they're messages in bottles, thrown across the sea of time, and sometimes against all odds, they wash up on the right shore, in front of the right person, at the right moment. Sometimes the dead can still speak. They just need someone to listen. 3 months after the O'Brien case breaks, you're back in your basement kingdom. The flickering fluorescents have been replaced. Apparently, solving a 147-year-old murder gets you better lighting. The university even sent down a dehumidifier that hums like a congested bear, but keeps the papers from dissolving into prehistoric soup. You're deep in the 1889 files now. The letter you found, "I write this knowing I may burn in hell for my silence," has led you down a rabbit hole of insurance claims, property deeds, and police reports that smell faintly of smoke even after 135 years. The official story was straightforward. 3 Irish immigrants, Michael Donnelly, Patrick Flynn, and James McCarthy, had conspired to burn down a warehouse district for the insurance money. They'd been caught, tried, and sentenced to 20 years hard labor. Case closed, except the letter tells a different story. The fires were set, this much is true, but not by those poor souls rotting in prison. I know because I watched from my office window as the real arsonists did their work. I saw who struck the matches. I saw who gave the orders. And may God forgive me, I said nothing. The letter is unsigned, but the handwriting matches other documents from Henry Whitman, a clerk at Hartbridge Insurance Company. You've spent weeks learning to recognize his cramped, guilty script. He continues, "Mr. Hartbridge himself arranged it all. The warehouses were failing. The goods inside were worthless, rotted grain, spoiled merchandise that couldn't be sold, but insured for full value. All he needed were convenient scapegoats." You lean back in your chair, feeling that familiar chill that comes with uncovering old injustices. 3 innocent men spent 20 years breaking rocks because Alexander Hartbridge needed to cover his bad investments. The confession continues with meticulous detail. Dates, times, amounts. Whitman names the actual arsonists, 2 men named Coleman and Marsh, both Hartbridge employees who conveniently disappeared after the trial. He describes the planning meetings held in Hartbridge's own dining room. He even mentions where the accelerants were purchased, from a chemical supplier 2 towns over, to avoid local suspicion. But it's the next part that makes your blood run cold. The Irish were chosen specifically. Mr. Hartbridge said, "No one will question it. Everyone knows they're drunks and troublemakers." He laughed when he said it. Laughed about destroying 3 innocent lives. You cross-reference with immigration records. Donnelly, Flynn, and McCarthy had arrived just 6 months before the fires. They'd been working as day laborers, sending money home to families in County Cork. After their conviction, those families stopped receiving letters, stopped receiving money, probably assumed their men had abandoned them or died. Martha brings you coffee, the good stuff from the shop across the street, not the courthouse swamp water. Another late night? Another injustice, you reply, showing her the letter. She reads it, her face hardening with each line. Hartbridge Insurance is still in business. They're Hartbridge Financial now. Big glass building on State Street. You hadn't made that connection. The company that profited from framing 3 innocent men is still around, probably with corporate value statements about integrity and trust plastered on their walls. "What else have you found?" Martha asks. You show her the paper trail. Hartbridge's financial records from before the fire show massive losses. The insurance payouts afterward? Pure profit. The company survived and thrived on the ashes of those warehouses and the lives of 3 innocent men. But there's more. You found the trial transcripts. The prosecutor, a man named Josiah Blackwood, presented evidence that seems too convenient. Witness testimonies that match word for word, never a good sign. Physical evidence that appeared at just the right moments, and a defense attorney who barely defended at all. "Look at this," you tell Martha, pointing to a notation in the court records. The defense attorney, William Morse, he started working for Hartbridge Insurance 3 months after the trial. "Bought and paid for," Martha mutters. But the real smoking gun comes from an unexpected source. In a box of unrelated documents from 1890, you find a suicide note. Coleman, one of the actual arsonists named in Whitman's confession, had taken his own life a year after the fires. "I cannot live with what I've done," Coleman wrote. "Those men in prison haunt my dreams. I see their faces in the flames. Hartbridge promised no one would be hurt, that it was just property. But those men's lives were destroyed as surely as if we'd burned them too." Coleman names names, confirms dates, and adds details Whitman didn't know. Between the 2 confessions, you have a complete picture of the conspiracy. But there's one problem. Everyone involved is long dead. There's no one to prosecute, no company assets to seize for restitution. Or is there? You spend the next week building an airtight case, not for criminal court. That ship sailed over a century ago, but for the court of public opinion and historical record. Every document is photographed, cataloged, cross-referenced. You create a timeline that shows exactly how Hartbridge orchestrated the frame-up. The descendants are harder to track down. Immigration records, genealogy websites, and occasionally just calling every Donnelly in the phone book. It takes 3 weeks, but you find them. Michael Donnelly's great-great-granddaughter lives in Boston. She's a teacher, and when you call her, she starts crying. "We always knew," she says. "It was family legend that he was innocent. My grandmother used to say her father would never have done such a thing. But we had no proof. Just stories." Patrick Flynn's descendants are in Chicago. James McCarthy's are scattered across California. You conference call with all of them, sharing what you found. The silence on the line when you finish is heavy, with the weight of validation finally arriving. "Can we clear their names?" asks Robert Flynn, Patrick's great-grandson. "Officially?" You think about the O'Brien case, about posthumous justice. "We can try." The story breaks on a Tuesday. The local paper runs it front page. Courthouse archives reveal 1889 frame-up. By Wednesday, it's picked up nationally. By Thursday, Hartbridge Financial has released a statement expressing deep regret for historical actions that don't reflect our current values. But something unexpected happens on Friday. A package arrives at the courthouse addressed to you. Inside is a leather journal and a note from an elderly woman named Eleanor Hartbridge Morris. My family has carried this shame in secret for generations. My great-great-grandfather left this journal, and we've hidden it out of cowardice. But your work has shown me that truth matters more than reputation. It's time. The journal is Alexander Hartbridge's personal diary, and it's damning. Entry after entry details not just the warehouse conspiracy, but a pattern of fraud, manipulation, and destroyed lives spanning decades. The Irishmen weren't his first victims, just the most convenient. He writes about his schemes with the casual tone of someone discussing gardening. The beauty of using immigrants is their isolation. No powerful friends, no connections to complicate matters. The Irish today serve their purpose admirably. But there's something else in the journal, something that connects to a case you'd filed away as unsolvable. Utilize the same approach as the Riverside Bank matter in '73. Amazing how a few forged signatures and the right scapegoat can solve any financial embarrassment. The Riverside Bank matter. You remember that file? A robbery in 1873 where a Chinese immigrant named Li Wei was convicted, despite multiple witnesses placing him elsewhere. The case had bothered you, but without more evidence, now you have it. Hartbridge's journal details how he arranged the false evidence, bribed witnesses, and ensured Li Wei's conviction to cover embezzlement by the bank's president, Hartbridge's brother-in-law. You're not just uncovering individual injustices anymore, you're revealing a system. A network of powerful men who treated immigrant lives as disposable solutions to their financial problems. Martha helps you pull every case from 1870 to 1890 involving immigrant defendants and financial crimes. The pattern is sickening in its clarity. Whenever a business faced ruin, whenever embezzlement needed covering, whenever insurance fraud required a fall guy, somehow an immigrant ended up convicted. The Italian dock workers blamed for cargo theft in 1876. The stolen goods were actually sold by the shipping company owner to cover gambling debts. The German brewers convicted of poisoning competitors' beer in 1881. The real poisoner was the prosecutor's brother, eliminating competition for his own brewery. Case after case, the same pattern: fabricated evidence, purchased testimony, immigrants chosen specifically because they lacked the connections to fight back, and threading through it all, the same names: Hartbridge, Blackwood, Mills. Apparently corruption ran in that family, a cabal of the powerful protecting their own. You create a massive timeline on the basement wall. Red string connects cases to conspirators, victims to beneficiaries. It looks like something from a detective movie, except every connection represents a destroyed life, a family torn apart, a grave injustice. This is bigger than we thought, Martha says quietly. She's right. You're not just looking at individual crimes anymore. You're looking at systematic oppression, at how the justice system itself was weaponized against the vulnerable. It's not ancient history. It's a mirror reflecting issues that still exist today. The phone rings constantly now. Reporters, historians, descendants of victims. The state attorney general wants to issue formal pardons for all the wrongly convicted. The Historical Society is planning a memorial. Law schools are adding your findings to their curricula on systemic injustice. But you're already diving deeper. Because Hartbridge's journal mentions something else. The beauty of our arrangement is its replicability. I've shared our methods with associates in Philadelphia, New York, and Chicago. Why solve financial difficulties honestly when there's always a convenient foreigner to blame? This wasn't just a local conspiracy. It was a franchise operation. You start receiving packages from archivists in other cities. They've been inspired by your work, diving into their own courthouse basements. What they find is horrifying in its consistency. Philadelphia, 1882. 5 Jewish merchants convicted of arson, covering up insurance fraud by respected businessmen. New York, 1877. Irish servant girls blamed for jewelry thefts actually committed by their employers' gambling-addicted sons. Chicago, 1885. Polish workers framed for industrial sabotage that was actually planned corporate destruction for insurance money. The packages pile up on your desk. Each one a voice from the past saying, "We were innocent. Please remember us." You're no longer working alone. A network of archivists, historians, and genealogists has formed. They call themselves the Paper Trail Project. Together, you're mapping a hidden history of America, the systemic use of immigrant communities as economic scapegoats. But then something happens that shifts your investigation in an unexpected direction. A woman appears at the courthouse, asking for you specifically. She's elderly but sharp-eyed, carrying a battered briefcase. "My name is Sarah Chen," she says. "My great-grandfather was Li Wei. The man you proved was innocent of the Riverside Bank robbery." You start to respond, but she holds up a hand. "I'm not here to thank you. I'm here to help. You see, my family didn't just preserve stories of his innocence. We preserved evidence. Evidence that the conspiracy went higher than you know." She opens the briefcase. Inside are documents written in Chinese, along with translations. Li Wei, it turns out, had been a scholar in China before immigrating. He'd kept meticulous records of his persecution, including names and details his accusers never knew he'd overheard. He spoke better English than he let on, Sarah explains. He listened. He wrote. And he hid these documents, hoping someday someone would care about the truth. The documents reveal something stunning. The conspiracy wasn't just businessmen covering financial crimes. It involved judges, police commissioners, even state legislators. Li Wei had overheard them discussing their immigrant solution to various political and economic problems. One name appears repeatedly: Thaddeus Morrison, a state senator who would later become governor. "Oh my God," Martha breathes, reading over your shoulder. "Morrison University is named after him. Morrison Hospital, Morrison Avenue. He's considered a founding father of the modern state." But according to Li Wei's records, Morrison was the architect of the entire system. He'd organized the network, connecting corrupt businessmen with complicit law enforcement and purchased judges. He'd even written a manual on the management of undesirable elements that was circulated among the conspirators. "My great-grandfather heard Morrison say something," Sarah Chen continues. "He said, 'History is written by the winners, and we always win.' Not anymore, you think?" Sarah Chen's documents lead you to something extraordinary. Li Wei mentions a collection point where the conspirators kept records of their schemes. "For insurance," he'd overheard Morrison say. "So none of us can betray the others." The location he describes doesn't make sense at first. It's just an address, no longer valid after a century of urban development. But cross-referencing with old city maps, you realize it's pointing to what's now the basement of the Morrison Memorial Library. Yes, the Memorial Library for the architect of the conspiracy. Getting access requires political maneuvering. The Morrison family still has influence, and they're not happy about your investigation tarnishing their ancestors' legacy. But public pressure and a court order finally get you in. The basement of the Morrison Library is different from your courthouse archives. Cleaner, climate-controlled, and in a forgotten corner behind a wall that looks newer than the rest, you find it. A hidden room. And inside, filing cabinets that haven't been opened in over a century. "Holy shit," Martha whispers. It's the first time you've heard her swear. The files are perfectly preserved, and they're exactly what Li Wei described. Records of every conspiracy, names, dates, amounts, who was framed, who benefited, who got paid off. It's all here, organized with the same meticulous care these men applied to destroying lives. But it's more than just records. There are photographs, the conspirators at social gatherings toasting their success, letters discussing new targets, financial records showing the flow of money from destroyed immigrant businesses to the conspirators' accounts. And at the center of it all, Morrison's manual. On the management of undesirable elements is a how-to guide for systemic oppression. It discusses selecting victims, choose those without local family connections, fabricating evidence. Physical evidence can be planted, but witness testimony is more flexible. And managing public opinion. Always emphasize the foreign nature of the accused. Reading it makes you physically ill. This isn't just crime. It's industrialized injustice. But there's something else in the files, something that brings the conspiracy into the 20th century. Letters from the 1920s, 1930s, even the 1940s, showing that Morrison's system didn't die with him. His sons, grandsons, and their associates had continued the practice, adapting it for new waves of immigrants. The last dated document is from 1953. After that, the room was apparently sealed and forgotten. Until now. The discovery of the Morrison archive makes international news. The New York Times runs a series. The Smithsonian wants the documents. Congress holds hearings on historical injustices in the legal system. But for you, sitting in your basement, surrounded by evidence of systematic evil, the work feels both finished and unfinished. You've exposed the conspiracy, vindicated hundreds of victims, and rewritten a chunk of American history. But you can't bring back the dead. Can't return the years stolen from those who rotted in prison. Can't reunite the families torn apart. What you can do is ensure they're remembered. The memorial, when it's finally built, is simple. A wall of names, every victim you've identified. Next to each name, 2 dates, when they were wrongly convicted and when their innocence was finally recognized. The gap between those dates, sometimes over a century, speaks louder than any speech. At the dedication, descendants of victims stand next to descendants of conspirators. Eleanor Hartbridge Morris speaks, acknowledging her family's role and pledging their fortune to a foundation supporting immigrant rights. The Morrison family, after initial resistance, agrees to add contextual plaques to all buildings bearing their name. But it's Sarah Chen who says what matters most. My great-grandfather died believing no one would ever know the truth. He was wrong. The paper trail survived, the truth survived, and now, finally, he can rest. 6 months after the Morrison archive discovery, you're back to your regular work. The basement feels different now. Less like a tomb and more like a garden where truth can bloom, even after centuries underground. You're cataloging mundane civil cases from the 1920s when an envelope falls out of a folder. It's addressed to the future finder of truths. Your hands tremble as you open it. If you are reading this, then my faith in time and justice was not misplaced. I am Thomas Pemberton, and I have spent my life hiding truths in these files, hoping someone would care enough to look. Thomas Pemberton, the clerk who hid the evidence of Margaret O'Brien's innocence. He'd been doing it all along. After my sister's murder and Mrs. O'Brien's judicial murder, I understood my purpose. I could not speak out. I had no power, no voice that would be heard. But I had access to documents. I had the ability to preserve what others wanted destroyed. Throughout these archives, I have hidden evidence of crimes unpunished, innocence condemned, and truth suppressed. Look for misfiled documents. Check between pages. Trust inconsistencies. The guilty often confess in writing, believing their words will be burned or buried. I saved them all. I trained others in my methods. We called ourselves the Keepers. In courthouses across this nation, we preserved what we could not speak. We knew that truth is patient. Truth can wait, and truth eventually finds its voice. If you have found this letter, you are now a keeper. The work continues. The voices still need to be heard, The paper trail never ends. The letter is dated 1891, 6 months before Thomas Pemberton's death. You sit in your basement, surrounded by boxes that now seem less like storage and more like treasure chests. How many more Thomas Pembertons were there? How many clerks, archivists, and record keepers had risked their jobs, maybe their lives, to preserve evidence of injustice? Martha finds you there an hour later, still holding the letter. You okay? You hand her the letter. She reads it, then looks at the countless boxes still unopened. The keepers, she says quietly. They were creating a future they couldn't see but believed in. And now we're here, you reply. Now we're here. Within a week of finding Pemberton's letter, strange things start happening. Archivists from across the country begin reporting similar discoveries. Hidden letters addressed to future finders or truth seekers, all signed by different names, but all describing the same thing: a secret network of record keepers preserving evidence of injustices. In Baltimore, a clerk named Elias Moore had hidden evidence clearing dozens of black men wrongly convicted during Reconstruction. In San Francisco, a Chinese-American record keeper named David Wong had preserved proof of land theft from Chinese families. In El Paso, Maria Gonzalez had documented systematic deportations of American citizens of Mexican descent. The keepers had been everywhere, a shadow network operating inside the very system that perpetrated injustices. They couldn't stop the wrongs, but they could ensure evidence survived. You create a database mapping known keepers and their preserved evidence. The pattern that emerges is staggering. For over a century, these men and women had been secretly documenting America's hidden crimes, creating an underground archive of truth. But the most remarkable discovery comes from your own courthouse. In a box marked Facilities Maintenance 1890-1900, you find architectural drawings. They show the courthouse basement, but with additions. Hidden compartments built into the walls. Armed with the drawings and a very confused maintenance crew, you start examining the basement walls. Behind a filing cabinet that hasn't been moved since the Carter administration, you find it. A brick that's slightly different from the others. It pulls out, revealing a space behind. Inside are dozens of documents, wrapped in oilcloth. Letters, photographs, even what appears to be an early recording cylinder. And a note: the most dangerous truths require the deepest hiding. These documents implicate those still in power as I write. I dare not file them normally. But truth must survive. T. Pemberton. The documents are explosive. They detail corruption reaching into the 20th century, names you recognize from street signs and statues, families that still hold influence, companies that still operate. Suddenly, your historical investigation isn't so historical anymore. The first sign of trouble is subtle. Your courthouse computer access becomes temporarily restricted. The basement's new climate control system mysteriously breaks. Boxes you'd marked for review go missing, then reappear in different locations. Martha notices it too. Someone's watching us. The second sign is less subtle. A law firm representing concerned historical preservation interests sends a cease and desist letter. They claim your research methods are damaging valuable historical documents. It's nonsense, but it would tie you up in court for months. Then comes the meeting. You're summoned to the courthouse administrator's office where 3 people in expensive suits wait. They introduce themselves as representatives of families and companies mentioned in your recent findings. "We appreciate your historical work," says the lead suit, a woman with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "But perhaps it's time to focus on less controversial periods. The Civil War, perhaps? Everyone loves Civil War discoveries." "Are you trying to bribe me?" you ask. "We're trying to help you," she replies. "This research, it serves no one. The people involved are long dead. But their descendants, their companies, they're part of this community now. Why destroy that over ancient history?" You think of Margaret O'Brien, of Lee Way, of all the voices silenced for so long. Because it's not ancient. To the families who were destroyed, you say. Because truth matters, even when it's inconvenient. The smile disappears entirely. Truth is expensive, archivist. Be sure you can afford it. After they leave, Martha looks pale. They'll bury us in litigation, or worse, they'll just bury the archives. A convenient fire, a water pipe break. She's right. You've seen it happen before. Archives that contain inconvenient truths have a habit of meeting unfortunate ends. But you remember Pemberton's letter. The keepers had faced the same threats, the same pressures. And they'd found a way. That night, working from home, you begin the largest scanning project of your life. Every document related to the Morrison conspiracy, the Keepers Network, and the modern connections gets digitized. High resolution, multiple formats. But you don't just store them on a hard drive. You've learned from the Keepers. Truth needs to be scattered to survive. You create an encrypted network, uploading documents to servers around the world. You establish deadman switches. If you don't check in every week, the documents release automatically to news organizations, universities, and civil rights groups. Other archivists join the effort. The Paper Trail Project becomes a digital preservation movement. Thousands of documents, hidden for over a century, finally see light, even if that light is the glow of computer screens. The pressure intensifies. Your job is suddenly restructured, leaving you with no access to the archives. Martha is offered early retirement with a generous package. If she signs a non-disclosure agreement, she refuses, but it's too late for them to stop it. The documents are already spreading. Journalism students write theses on the Morrison Network. Lawyers use your findings to challenge modern cases. Descendants of victims organize, demanding acknowledgement and restitution. The memorial wall you helped create becomes a pilgrimage site. People leave flowers, photographs, letters to ancestors they never met but now know were innocent. 1 year later, you're working as an independent researcher, funded by grants and donations from people who believe in the work. The courthouse basement is off limits to you now, but it doesn't matter. You've trained dozens of others in the Keepers' methods. The work continues. Then Sarah Chen calls. She's been translating more of her great-grandfather's documents and found something incredible. Li Wei wrote about a meeting he witnessed. Morrison and the others planning something bigger than individual frames. They talked about ensuring their system would survive them, about placing their sons in positions of power, about creating institutions that would continue their work legally. What kind of institutions, you ask, though you're afraid you already know? Banks that would deny loans to immigrant businesses, real estate companies that would enforce racial boundaries, law firms that would ensure the right people stayed in power. They weren't just criminals. They were architects of systemic racism. The implications are staggering. The Morrison Network hadn't disappeared. It had evolved, transformed from illegal conspiracy to legal discrimination. The methods changed, but the goal remained, keeping power in the right hands. You think about modern redlining, voter suppression, immigration policies. The paper trail doesn't just lead to the past, it leads to the present. Your final discovery comes from an unexpected source. A young archivist working in the courthouse sends you a message. Found something. Can't email. Meet me. You meet at a coffee shop. She slides a flash drive across the table. I found another hidden room. Newer. Documents from the 1960s through the 1990s. The keepers never stopped. They evolved too. The documents on the drive are incredible. Civil rights era injustices documented and hidden, environmental crimes covered up, political corruptions preserved for future revelation. The keepers had adapted to every era, always working in shadows, always preserving truth. But the last file is what stops your heart. It's a list of current keepers. Archivists, clerks, records managers in courthouses, libraries, and government offices across the country. Still working. still hiding evidence, still believing that truth will eventually find its voice. Your name isn't on the list, you were never officially recruited, but at the bottom, in handwriting you recognize as Martha's, is a note. The accidental keeper. The one who found us when we needed to be found. The work continues. Martha was a keeper all along. She'd guided you, supported you, helped you discover what needed discovering. Not because she didn't know what was hidden, but because she knew it was time for it to be found. 5 years after that first day in the courthouse basement, you stand before a congressional committee. They're investigating systemic injustices in the American legal system, using your research as a foundation. The descendants of Morrison and Hartbridge sit in the gallery, some supportive, others still resistant. You tell the committee about the paper trail, about how documents can be weapons or shields, chains or keys, about how truth, preserved in filing cabinets and hidden rooms, waits patiently for its moment. The keepers understood something, you conclude. Individual injustices are tragedies, but documented patterns of injustice are evidence that can change systems, laws, and futures. Every document we preserve, every truth we uncover, is a step toward justice. After the hearing, you return to your work. Not in the courthouse basement, you're still banned, but in a new archive funded by the families of those whose innocence you proved. It's called the Keeper's Archive, and it's not hidden. It's open to all. A place where truth doesn't have to wait centuries to be heard. Young archivists come to train with you. You teach them the Keeper's methods, but adapted for the digital age. How to recognize hidden truths, how to preserve dangerous documents, how to ensure that evidence survives attempts to destroy it. On your desk is a photo of Margaret O'Brien taken from an old newspaper. Next to it, photos of Lee Way, the Irish arsonist victims, and dozens of others whose innocence you've proven. They're all long dead, but their vindication lives. Late at night, when the archive is quiet, you sometimes think you hear them. Not ghosts, you don't believe in those, but echoes. Voices preserved in paper and ink, finally free to speak their truth. You pull on your gloves, still cotton, some traditions are worth keeping, and open another box. Because the paper trail never ends. There are always more voices waiting to be heard, more truths waiting to be uncovered, more justice waiting to be served. Somewhere in a courthouse basement or a forgotten filing cabinet or a hard drive in an estate sale, evidence waits. And somewhere, a new keeper is learning to look for it. The work continues, the trail endures, and truth, patient as always, waits for someone to care enough to find it. In the end, that's what the paper trail teaches. Justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Sometimes it's just justice waiting for the right person, in the right place, at the right time, to finally pick up a dusty box and listen to what the dead have been trying to say. You are that person now. And in courthouse basements and forgotten archives around the world, others are becoming that person too. The keepers are no longer a secret network. They're a movement, and every document saved, every truth preserved, every voice finally heard, proves what Thomas Pemberton knew all along. Truth is patient. Truth survives. And truth eventually always finds its way into the light. The paper trail continues, and so do you.